Check.
Check.
Check. Is my audio clear, guys, in the Zoom meeting? You can give a reaction, yeah, guys. If our audio is audible, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's seminar on forensic psychology, bridging the knowledge gap and unveiling career paths. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Anissa Nabila Kholfa, but you can call me Acha, and my partner here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Dipa Pramoja. You can call me Jess or Jason, whatever you guys prefer. And we are honored to be your master of ceremony for this enlightening and exciting event.
Okay, but before we enter further session in this seminar, I would like to remind all of you to scan the entry ticket that has been shown in the screen, since it is a requirement to record your attendance, yeah.
Maybe we will get around 1 until 2 minutes, ya, Kak Acha, for them to entry.
Yeah, that's right, Jessa. And don't forget to rename And don't forget to rename your name, yeah, guys. On the Zoom, don't forget to rename yourself. Name underscore Nim.
Yeah. For the virtual attendees, you can rename your format name into name underscore your full name. Okay. Okay, so it seems like most of the participants have already filled the entry tickets. So, first and foremost, let us extend a warm welcome to all of you, our dearest and enthusiastic participants. It is wonderful to see such a great turnout for today. And now, let's acknowledge the hard work, yeah, of all the organizing committee and all those who have made this seminar possible. A big thank you to everyone, and let's give a warm applause to everyone.
And today's seminar promises to be a remarkable journey into the fascinating world of forensic psychology. We will explore the critical role it plays in the intersection of psychology and the legal systems, and how it helps us understand the psychological aspect of criminal behavior, victimization, and the rehabilitation of offenders.
Moreover, we will delve into the diverse career opportunities available in this field and provide you the valuable insights on how to embark on this fulfilling career path.
And before we proceed, I would like to remind everyone to please switch your mobile phone to silent mode to interrupt during this session.
Okay, so without further ado, let's welcome our speaker, Sir Manuel Galan Morillo. Sir Manuel Galan Morillo is a distinguished psychologist specializing in forensic psychology and antisocial behaviors. He is currently an assistant lecturer at the Universidad Católica San Antonio de Murcia, or UCAM. Sir Manuel holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Salamanca, a master's degree in legal and forensic psychology from the University of Granada, and a master's degree in general health psychology from the University Miguel Hernandez of Elche.
And also, right now he is pursuing a degree in criminology from Universidad Nacional a Distancia. Sir Morillo's career is marked by his profound expertise in forensic psychology, particularly in the study of antisocial personality trait and intimate partner violence. His comprehensive background in forensic psychology, coupled with his teaching and research experience, positions him as an ideal speaker in bridging the knowledge gap and unveiling career path in forensic psychology. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to Sir Manuel Galan Morillo.
Okay, but before we proceed to the next session, I would like to remind again for all the virtual attendees to turn on their camera and rename the rename format to name underscore your full name. Okay, now to Sir Manuel Galan Morillo, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for this warm welcome. I am impressed by our MCs today. Thank you very much for presenting me. And as they said, today I am going to speak about forensic psychology. I am going to speak this part of the presentation in which I was introducing myself, as you have already introduced me. Um, I just also wanted to say thanks to the Erasmus program who has helped me to be here with some funding. So thank you very much to Erasmus program. And I am just going directly to the introduction of the index of my lecture today. Today I'm going to be speaking, as they have already introduced, about forensic psychology. As I don't know your level of forensic psychology, how much you know, how much you don't know, I am just going to frame it a bit so that at least all of you exit today with kind of an idea of what forensic psychology is and what do a forensic psychologist does, more or less. And after I'll move to another part of the session in which I am going to speak about research in forensic psychology, and I am going to focus on my specific field of research in this forensic or criminal psychology. I will introduce you these antisocial personality traits, and as I do teach personality but also psychological assessment, I will also introduce you how to conduct an assessment on this field. As they have mentioned, I hold 2 masters in psychology, but not still a PhD because I am working on it. And I will introduce, well, I will show you the results of kind of the main research of my PhD, which is in the development of a new scale. This said, let's start with forensic psychology, profession, and research. Just trying to introduce forensic psychology, we have to frame more or less the term forensic psychology, as one, when speaking about forensic psychology, tend to think in criminal minds, just trying to profile criminals. Well, that is forensic psychology, but that is not only forensic psychology. There is a lot more inside forensic psychology. And in fact, if you want to work in that specific area in forensic psychology, good luck. Very difficult to be a criminal profiler because usually no one is really willing to pay for that. You will have to be part of the police, and even if you're part of the police, it is going to be hard for becoming a criminal profiler. So I am going to speak about the different areas inside legal psychology. Again, this distinction between forensic and legal relies a lot on different terminological arguments that I do not want to delve inside. I am just going to consider legal psychology as the starting point and forensic psychology one field inside legal psychology. We have to be aware that when we are speaking about legal or forensic psychology, we are just speaking about putting all our psychological knowledge, all our psychological science into the service of the legal system. And that's it. Depending on how we put this knowledge into the self, we are going to be moving or speaking about forensic, we are going to be speaking about victimology, criminal psychology, penitentiary and preventive psychology, or we will be aiding with eyewitnesses in testimony psychology. So first, what is this thing about testimony psychology? We all understand the word testimony, but how can psychology help in this? Well, whenever a crime is committed, we are going to look for, or police officers are going to look for proofs so that they can find the perpetrator guilty, and sometimes the only proof that they have is the testimony of the victim or the testimony of an eyewitness. So aiding and helping into developing ways of interviewing or assessing who is going to be a reliable victim or assessing the variables that are going to be involved in the testimony of the eyewitness are going to help a lot in the process of taking judgmental decisions. And this is a field in which we can help. I will speak a bit more about this later. When we speak about penitentiary and preventive psychology, again, we are trying to put psychology into the service of the preventive and the penitentiary services. If we want to reinsert someone into society, we have to know again the variables that are involved in that person committing the crime and the variables that will help this person into become again a full member, so to say, of the society, a non-criminal. When we speak about criminal psychology, we are speaking a bit more about criminal profiling here, because we will look at the variables that are involved in someone committing a crime, studying antisocial behavior, trying to observe what is generating criminals to initiate this behavior, to maintain or to cease this behavior. This is also why I study criminology, because I am interested in all these variables, not only the psychological ones, but also the social, anthropological, even the law-related, the legal-related ones. So there is where we would be speaking about criminal psychology, and psychology applied to victims would be kind of part of the victimology. So anything that can be related to psychology that applies to the victims, as they are the passive subjects of crime, looking for protective factors, looking for risk factors, looking for how can we help victims who enter in the legal system. Someone has to take care of all these gaps in the knowledge. So there is where forensic psychology enters. And last but not least, our forensic psychology, which is just basically using the psychologist as an expert inside the trials. Whenever a judge needs someone, an expert, a perito to help him or her in taking any decision, there is where we put our psychological knowledge into the service of the legal system. And you might be wondering, when may I need a psychologist for a trial? Well, in the same way you need for medical forensic, in the same way you may need an engineering to see why this building fell, or in the same way we are going to act as part of the legal system. First, combining with the testimony, with the witness's testimony, whenever we have to validate the witness of the testimony of a witness or a victim, it is very common, and it is also very sad, that in Spain, most of the cases that I receive, because I do work as a forensic psychologist, half of them are family cases. So whenever two parents get divorced and the child has to go with one or the other, someone has to help them. So there is where we enter, trying to assess all the variables that might be involved in a good parenting style, so that we can help the judge to take a decision. But that, I said, half of the cases. The other half, as I said, that it was sad, we tend to speak about child abuse cases. And in that child abuse cases, usually the only proof that we have to test the validity or that the crime has really happened is the testimony. So we need to develop tools to test the validity of that testimony, and we have to use that tools in order to prove that this is not a fake or a made up testimony, or that it is not a false memory, or that basically that it is a real, that this has happened, and that the child is not making it up. So there is where we can take part. Also, when someone files a complaint alleging some kind of psychological damage, someone has to assess that psychological damage. We will see a case later of this, so we will discuss it a bit more, but it is not just about assessing as we would do it in clinical settings in which we trust, and understand me when I say trust, the person we have in front, in which we just look for variables that could help for the treatment. Now we have to assess the kind of the quantity of the damage that has been held in this criminal situation. So still, someone has to do it, the forensic psychologist. I have already mentioned this thing about parenting divorce. Also, when someone commits a crime, was this person completely aware of the situation in which he or she was involved? Did he or she had all his or her cognitive capacities so he could understood that what he was doing was wrong and was not part of an, I don't know, psychotic attack, so to say? So there, another person has to assess this. Again, the role of the forensic psychology. And also imagine that someone has already been convicted and it is about going out of prison. Someone has to declare that this person is not going to commit the crime again. So we can also assess this possibility of risk of happening again. So risk assessment is also part of the task of the forensic psychologist. As I said, we just have around 1 hour, so I am just trying to frame you a bit so you have an idea. We would need a full master's to specifically address all of these different points. But at least you know that if you want to become a forensic psychologist, mostly these are the things that I guess you are going to do. Let's try to think, as I said, because I guess that more or less, how much do you know about psychological assessment? Something at least? Well, I will understand that you know a bit about psychological assessment, and let's try to think about the differences of assessing in psychology between clinical psychology and forensic psychology, taking this simple case of having to assess psychological damage. Whenever we are receiving as counselors someone suffering from something, we are assessing this person. We try to see if this person is suffering from this depression with these variables involved, so that this variable is causing this other variable to happen, so that now with all this knowledge, I know what do I have to do in order to help this person. So in forensic psychology, this is not specifically the process we are going to follow, but there are going to be some similarities. As I said, let's say that someone has been victimized and the judge asks us to emit a report on the psychological consequences of that damage. It is basically about assessing psychological consequences, psychological symptoms, things that I guess that after the major you're doing, you will be able at least to think about. What variables would you assess? I'm now asking for a bit of participation. What variables would you assess in this case? You can also help me from home if you open the mic.
Maybe the trauma.
Trauma is perfect. We can assess PTSD as a variable there, perfect. What else? Memory. Memory, what does this person is able to remember? Maybe if the trauma was really hard, might suffer from some dissociative symptoms, so memory would be affected. What else? Depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms. Simplifying it more or less, we got the idea. We all know what to assess, what variables to assess. We can think in depression, we can think in anxiety, all the symptoms related to PTSD. Sometimes even we can focus a bit more on self-esteem, maybe a bit more on self-esteem, because it is usually affected after having suffered a crime, or whatever any other psychological variable that might be involved in this specific crime. I am just presenting you a very general situation. But this serves for both, for clinical and for forensic psychology. What else do you think that we need to assess in forensic psychology? Now it gets hard, because with this, how do I know that the person who is demanding another one, it is not doing because of the benefits that this person is going to obtain, and not because they are really suffering? So here we do have to assess or to establish two new hypotheses. First, we will need to establish the causal link. Let's say that in this victim we have found a lot of anxiety symptoms, very severe anxiety. Are we able to say that this anxiety comes from the traumatic situation, from the victimization situation? Maybe this anxiety is coming from all the trial related processes that this person is involved, and we are not even able to determine if we should blame the perpetrator for that anxiety or not. Same situation with depression. Not the same with post-traumatic stress symptoms, because in fact with the post-traumatic stress symptoms we are already linking the victimization situation with the symptoms that we are observing. If we see that someone is re-experiencing that problem, that is already telling us that that causal link exists. If, well, as I said, we can more or less see this with post-traumatic stress symptoms, it is wonderful when I find in an assessment and understand my wonderful term. It is very good for me, or it makes things easier for me whenever I find any post-traumatic stress symptoms, because I know that they are coming from somewhere, and this somewhere is usually the thing or the crime that is being judged. So this causal link is already established. But what if we do know that all victims do not have to develop post-traumatic stress disorder? What other things can help us in establishing that causal link? Chronological order. If this person was the happiest person ever until the crime happened, and then anxiety appeared, depression appeared, and we do have some objective indicators that this is happening, not only the testimony of the person, that is also helping us to establish the causal link. And moving to the other variable that has to appear as an hypothesis when speaking in forensic psychology, when we are in clinical psychology, we tend to work a lot on the clinical relationship, on the rapport, even though we also work on the rapport in forensic psychology, but we do not really need the trust of the victim. We do not really need the victim to be kind of our friend. We are just establishing a working relationship. So we do also need to assess malengineering, because there is a possibility that this person has filed this report because of the benefits that they were able to receive. So we do need to assess simulation, the simulation of symptoms. Imagine, when I say simulation, I say that A lot of times I have found people trying to say that they are far worse than they really are because the the compensation they were going to receive would be bigger if they were more depressed or if they pretended to be more depressed. Imagine that we were on this case of someone divorcing, having children, and disagreeing about the custody. Maybe someone was or had any kind of psychopathology and they would try to dissimulate it, trying to pretend that they are not suffering from anything in order to show better parenting skills. So again, something that we have to be aware of. And also this thing that I told you with the testimony, we also have to be aware of false memories or made up memories, things invented memories, things like this that might affect our our decision. So we have already about how to assess the causal link, but how would you assess this malengineering, which is in the end the role of us as forensic psychologists? A bit difficult. Best motivation, we can try to motivate them a lot, to motivate them to give us honest answers, not only motivating them as come on you can do it, but telling them that if they are trying to deceive us, we are going to be able to detect that. So that usually helps a lot in generating validate assessments. But what else? Because with motivation, we are not going to catch those that really want to trick us. That's perfect.
Objective assessment about the victim.
That's perfect. The objective assessment term is what we are looking for, other sources of information. In the end, we cannot only rely on self-reports. We cannot only rely on the interview we are generating on the person. If this person is telling us that he or she is more depressed than before, we can ask their parents, we can ask their friends, we can ask people around them to see if all their testimonies match so that we are obtaining some more information. Not only relying on information given by other people, but also by other kind of objective assessments. If we have a non-self-reported way of assessing depression as any other symptom that we are speaking about, that's also a possibility to be used so that above the self-reports, we do have the testimony given by the observers or some of their friends. We do also have some other objective physiological, any other proof that can help us in giving us some more information. But last but not least, what we tend to use a lot is specific questionnaires developed to assess malengineering of symptoms. I guess that if you are familiarized with psychological assessment questionnaires or tools, as for example, the very famous MMPI, in Minnesota Multifaceted Inventory, that MMPI have validity scales. So directly with that validity scales, we are already assessing the validity of the symptoms. If the person is trying to give a better image, if the person is trying to give a worse image, if the person is trying to simulate, to dissimulate, if the person is directly not answering to our question, or even if that person is fatigued after 45 minutes of answer true or false to item to 400. Well, if we are speaking about the 2RF 300 and something, but if we were speaking about the MMPI2, 500 item. So imagine, we are going to obtain information about everything, about all that. And not only with that tool, we do have tools specifically um, developed for assessing these symptoms in forensic assessments. For example, I was telling you that if I want to assess the causal link between a crime and the consequences, I would always try to assess post-traumatic stress disorder. But what if someone knows the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? Or not even know, just have Googled them half an hour before my interview. They are going to tell me, yes, I re-experiment this. Yes, I feel more anxious after. Yes, I even have some dissociative symptoms. That is not valid at all in a forensic setting. In a clinical, it would be because we understand that the person is looking for help, so that they are going to be honest, but not in a forensic assessment. So, for example, another thing that I tend to do in my forensic assessments is try to use the less, not self-reports, but questionnaire style or standardized questionnaires, so that the task of the interviewee is just to agree or disagree on some statements. For someone who doesn't know about post-traumatic stress disorder, saying, have you re-experimented? Yeah, that sounds like harmful. I'm gonna say yes, because this is going to give me money. Do you sleep worse now? Yes. Do you feel? Yes. Do you whatever? Yes. It is very easy to not. I'm not gonna say discriminate, but recognize symptoms that might be related to my disorder. But I move away from this recognition task and I move towards a knowledge task. If you are really suffering it, please tell me about it. And with that, I'm not generating the most valid testimony ever, but I am generating a bit more complex task. If you are sleeping poorly now, you will be able to tell me, or at least you will know that. If you feel dizzy, if you feel whatever, at least I am not asking you to recognize. I am not asking you a recognition task. I don't know if you are used to multiple choices exam tests, but I guess that for you it's a lot more easy to study or to answer a multiple choice question than it is answering an essay type question in which you have to give a free speech of what you know. So basically, increasing the difficulty a bit and combining that increase in the difficulty with a specific tool developed for assessing the malengineering of symptoms. So these tools, as the validity scales in MMPI, might try to use scales that have been developed from symptoms that seem to be related with the ones that we are assessing, but that are very rare to happen, that hardly ever happen in clinical population. If the person is recognizing them or is saying that he or she is recognizing them, that is giving me some information assessing that person, that maybe that person is trying to deceive me somehow, is accepting that they are suffering from symptoms that are very, very, very rare. So with that, with all that information, I am able at least to, maybe not to say that this person is trying to simulate or that this person is trying to dissimulate, but that I cannot use the information that I have obtained from the clinical tools that I might have used for the psychological assessment. So basically, this is the main difference between forensic and clinical psychology. As I guess, as I said before, there are some other differences. When we are speaking about forensic psychology, we are not focused on the intervention. We are just focused on establishing the situation at the moment. When we are speaking about the therapeutical relationship, usually the forensic psychology is not a relationship that is based on trust, basically because we are not subject to confidentiality. We are going to file our report to the judge to take the decision. So that information that we collect is public. it is for the trial. So again, the relationship is going to be very different. But we still have to work on the rapport. Imagine to conduct an interview with someone who doesn't want to be interviewed. Even if we are there to help them, sometimes they are going to be reluctant to give us that information. So still we do have to work in the rapport. But we basically, if we are speaking with victims, it is going to be much easier. When we are speaking with perpetrators, maybe the rapport is harder to build. So I hope that with this small example, you have gotten a bit of the idea of how a forensic psychologist works differently compared to our clinical one. So that even if we focus on similar variables, we do have to include some more hypotheses into our assessment process. And with this, we move to the more criminal related part to this forensic psychology session, in which we are going to speak about research. First, I just wanted to tell you the research areas of the different areas in legal psychology, so that we can understand how we can conduct research in forensic psychology. When we were speaking about testimony, we were saying that we were interested in the variables that could affect testimony. So maybe trying to locate that specific variables is going to be a thing or a topic of interest for testimony psychologists, as well as all the research in memory and suggestibility. What can affect the memory on a witness? Are my questions going to suggest the answers on a witness? If I am telling someone, were you beaten by this person, I am already affecting their memories. If I am asking a more open question, I am helping this person to remember. So all this way of interviewing, all these variables involved in memory retrieval are going to be a topic of interest for testimony psychologists. If we speak about preventive, penitentiary, and even criminal psychology, well, if we speak about preventive, we are going to be interested in the development of rehabilitation programs and preventive ones, trying to develop risk assessment tools. If you were in my previous seminar in which I spoke about inmate partner violence, I spoke a lot about this development of risk assessment tools as a way of trying to avoid some types of crimes happening again. If we do speak about criminal psychology, we are speaking about variables involved in crime, criminal profiling, trying to locate the specific maybe personality factors, social influences on the development of crime. Again, the same, speaking about the victims, we can try to develop rehabilitation programs as well as with criminal or preventive psychology. We can also try to help in contributing, in aiding in the victimization process, because sometimes the worst part of being a victim is not suffering the crime itself, but what comes after. All the trial process, the re-victimization situations in which you have to explain the crime over and over, what you live, how you felt. Imagine that it is something embarrassing. You will have to tell it over and over and over. So again, something that it is not that easy. For example, I do have a case that I have to prepare. Just when I land, the next day I have to go to the judges, to this big legal building, to how can I explain this? To create official proof, because I received this case of a child who reported some sexual abuse behaviors. So in order to avoid re-victimization, she is only going to be asked once to tell her testimony, so that she does not need to go to the trial again to testify in front of the suspected perpetrator. So me as a psychologist is going to be the one conducting the interview in order to obtain as much information as I can without suggesting any answer, which is also very important because, as I said, it is very likely that her testimony is the only proof that we have. So in order to avoid re-victimization and to provide all the scientific warranties, a psychologist must be there in order to assess that everything has been done properly and that victim rights are fulfilled, but also the perpetrator ones are also found. And as again, last but not least, forensic psychology research would be a lot more about developing and validating tools to test this fake symptomatology, maybe even to locate variables of interest for a specific crime. So if I know how a victim of something, of some specific crime would behave, I will be able to locate that specific variables when receiving a crime, and will give me some more information in order to complete this triangulation of symptoms, this triangulation of observer reports, this triangulation of physiological objectives tests, so that I can obtain some more information. And now, with this being said, I am going to move to my specifically and particularly area of interest when speaking about research in forensic psychology. And as I do teach psychological assessment and personality psychology, I am mainly interested in the personality variables that can help us in explaining some criminal or antisocial behaviors. So most of my research till now has been in trying to predict some antisocial behaviors from inmate partner violence, bullying, online sexual victimization, trolling, just using personality variables, which is not comprehensively addressing the antisocial behavior itself, but trying to start from the individual factors. So in this case, I do have to speak about the dark traits and how can we assess these dark traits. So please let me introduce you to the dark traits. I guess that most of you have heard about Eysenck and his PEN model, speaking about psychoticism, extroversion, neuroticism, Cadell with the 16PF, probably the big five, or even nowadays, it is a lot more research on the Exaco model. But do this model tell us in depth about our dark side? Well, they do, because when we speak about the Exaco, we do have this honesty, humility dimension. Also in the big five, we have the agreeableness dimension with the opposite pole, which is in the end antagonism. But we have some general information there. In 2022, Paulus and Williams came with this construct of the dark triad, which was a composition of 3 personality traits that could help us in explaining much better these specific antisocial personality tendencies. And later in 2009, the dark tetrad, a new trait, was included in this constellation that I am going to explain now. This first constellation was composed by subclinical psychopathy, subclinical narcissism, and Machiavellianism. When I speak about subclinical, remember that we are still speaking about personality, and we do also have to consider personality disorders in the dimensionality continuum. So subclinical psychopathy can apply to anyone here in this room, because we are just speaking about some specific personality characteristics that tend to appear in more or less degree in any of us. So if we would have in front of us the psychopath, a person with really high scores, very high scores in psychopathy, we would have someone and who would be antisocial with disinhibited behavior, low in empathy, callousness, and lack of remorse, who usually would tend to suffer from some affective deficits with a tendency towards impulsivity and some risky behaviors. So the idea that most of us would have when thinking about this movie, Psychopath. I don't think it is very necessary for me to speak about narcissism because I guess that it is a word that we tend to use commonly. We are speaking about someone who is self-centered, someone with some sense of entitlement that he or she deserves more than the rest, that he or she is more important, but usually narcissism tend to be considered as the light trait inside this constellation because it does not help us that much into predicting some antisocial behaviors and even helps us in predicting some prosocial ones. But when we speak about narcissism inside this constellation, we do speak about the antagonism side of narcissism. So though this ideal narcissistic boss that you may encounter at some point with an exploitative and personal style, I am the best, and since I am the best, I am going to step over you to be before you. That idea of self-promotion behaviors and this thing of high self-esteem. Do you think, again, asking for participation, do you think that all narcissistic people will have high self-esteem? No, why? That's a perfect answer. The reality is that if we just try to measure or we use a psychometric measure of self-esteem and a psychometric measure of narcissism, we are going to find a direct correlation. So narcissism helps us in predicting self-esteem. But if we go a bit deeper into that relationship, we are going to find two different types of narcissism. One that is this grandiose narcissism, the one that I am good, I know that I am good, and I am better than anyone. But the other one is the vulnerable narcissism, and it is the one that you were referring to. So I am good, I think that I am good, but if you criticize me, I am not that good, and I am going to feel really bad. So that person who is a tendency to suffer a lot from criticisms. Again, different situations, but usually when we do speak about the antagonistic side of narcissism, we are not speaking about self-esteem, but how this self-esteem approaches differences affect how I treat others. And one of my favorite ones, which is Machiavellianism, this comes from the Niccolo Machiavelli novel in which he was trying to teach the prince how to be a good leader, disregarding from any morality. So you need to be the best without caring of the consequences. So someone who is very strategic, with a very calculating and planning behavior would be someone very Machiavellian. Usually we think about someone who is very Machiavellian from this antagonistic side of view when we don't have someone who will manipulate others in his or in her benefit. Usually you will see a lot that when defining these traits, I tend to speak in male terms because we as male tend to obtain higher scores in these traits. And the last one was sadism. I guess that you will know more or less what sadism means, but basically here we are speaking about everyday sadism. So we are not speaking about any kind of psychopathology, but just a bit sense of enjoyment when seeing others suffer. So you can imagine, I don't know here because it is true that you have some very collectivistic values, but I come from a more individualistic society, and I guess that you all have met someone who had some kind of fun when his or her college failed an exam. So this small sense of enjoyment would be related with this everyday sadism. Whenever, for example, you are observing a fist fight on a video on your phone, and even you don't like people fighting, you cannot stop watching that. So that idea of enjoyment from other people suffering or even from obtaining control on others is understood as sadism. Okay? Let me try to tell you a story about this so that you perfectly understand what I refer when speaking about these traits. In 2001, the artist who was called Marco Evaristi went to an exhibition, and his art was about connecting 20 blenders, putting a fish on each of the blenders and allowing the visitors to tap a button that would turn on the blenders. I have browsed for information on what happened in the end. I have not found it. Some newspapers were saying one thing, the other were saying the opposite, but I don't really care for the objective of this. What do you think if the most psychopathic person in the world would enter the room? What do you think that this person would do? Tapping the button directly. But the important thing, why? If it would be for enjoyment, maybe we would be speaking about the sadistic one.
Actually, I have read this before too. At the start, a few participants go in, and none of them press the button. But after some time, someone press it, the others follow. There are others similar experiment too with a woman who just lay down, and you can do anything to her. At the beginning, nothing happens, but after one person do something cruel or immoral, the other starts to um, do it too, the bad thing.
Okay, thank you. So at least we do know more or less what happened. But when I was referring to the most psychopathic entry in the room, the reality is that if we do understand the definition, that person will touch the button. But why? Just in order to see if they are able to feel something. Because there is a tendency in psychopathy that they do commit into risk behaviors or into impulsive behaviors just with the objective of feeling something because of this low intensity of the feelings. What would the narcissistic person do when entering into the room? That's a more difficult one. I'll try to give you one possible answer. Maybe a very narcissistic person would enter into the room saying, "Oh, this is something I have done before, and I did it even better because I did not use that shitty blenders. I used bigger blenders with bigger fishes. My idea was much better than this artist's idea." What about the Machiavellian one? No, they are saying ask someone to push. That's perfect, but not even ask. Trying to manipulate someone to push. Why don't you push? Don't you want to see what would happen if you push? Try to. Let's see. And what about the sadistic one? We have already said it. Press it and enjoy it. They would see them suffer and leave the room. So more or less, we do have the idea of the traits that we are speaking about. Now, I would like you to do with me a very brief activity in which I would like to ask you for yourselves, honestly, the following items, as you would do in any other questionnaire in psychology. I guess that as you are used to fill out questionnaires, it has not been hard for you. This is how we measure these traits. This is how nowadays we are used to measure these traits. But now I would like you to imagine being in a situation in which you would get some benefit, in a situation in which you would be in a judge or in a job interview in which you want to obtain the job. Answer the items again. They are the same items, but you get the idea. Probably this time you have not provided the same answers. Probably this time in which you were looking for some benefit, you have completely modified your answers. Even if the first ones were, well, I do slightly agree, now you totally disagree with all of them because they are not going to get you the job position you are looking for. So this opens a field of research in which I am involved trying to solve or kind of solve this issue. There are different ways of solving this issue, and I am not going to give you a personality or psychological assessment class, but basically when we aim to assess personality, we do have different sources of data. We can use self-reported data, we can use data reported by an observer, as I said before, not only asking the person, but also asking their classmates, their friends, their parents, whoever who is around. We can also use objective or physiological data. We can use life outcome data. So imagine that if we want to assess stress, for example, in someone, and we know that this person smokes, maybe counting the number of cigarettes around the table will give us some information of the stress of that person. So basically a good assessment, an assessment that would be comprehensive and that would try to address all the variety of the possible behaviors would be one that includes all of these data sources. But the reality is that usually because of the time, because of the resources, because we might be only involved in surveying research, we do not have the means for conducting a comprehensive assessment. And we do have to choose which one do we choose. You are used to self-reports. Why do we choose self-reports? For a wide variety of reasons. They are cheaper, they are easy to use, and the most important one, because it is not that they are cheaper or inexpensive or easy to use, it is because they do provide specifically the information we are looking for, and we are asking it to the person who knows more about themselves. If you ask me about me, I am going to know a lot more about me than my mother, my father, or even my best friend, because I am aware of my desires, I am aware of my thoughts, I am aware of everything inside me. It is true that you can obtain some complementary information or some extra information by addressing these other three areas. But if you just have to choose one, we are always choosing the self-reports for some reasons. But the reality is that, as you have observed, the self-reports are not perfect and they are subject to many biases. One of these biases is social desirability or faking, that is going to affect their reliability and even their validity. You remember this differentiation? When we do speak about reliability, we speak about consistency in our measures. When we do speak about validity, we are trying to answer to the question, are we measuring what we want to measure? So if we do have something affecting any of those concepts, this something is directly going to affect our assessment. So this is a problem, but it is not such a big deal when we are speaking about extroversion. Asking someone so are you sociable? Do you like hanging out with others? It is not a statement that it is totally subjected to social desirability, but asking someone if they like to be cruel with others, is directly going to be affected by social desirability. So here I am going to show you the objective and the results of the main research inside my PhD. So attending to this issue that I have just showed you, our aim was to develop a first choice questionnaire aiming to mitigate the effects of this social desirability when answering to self-reported questionnaires. We use a sample of more than 1,000 participants. All of them were around 30 years old. Yes, convenient sample. Most of them were my students, and they just completed an online survey. In this online survey, we included all these different measures. We included two legal type scales for two traditional legal type scales for measuring the dark tetrad, the short dark triad, and the assessment of sadistic personality to measure psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and sadism. We use a small and not very good social desirability scale. We use the Exaco questionnaire so we can validate our constructs a bit, and we just to measure the big six, the six facets of the Exaco. We also use two validity measures that we use for validity, the a trolling scale, and also a scale that should be related with our traits on assessing aggression. And the scale that we developed, which was the first dark tetrad, which aims basically to address or to measure the same constructs, but with a forced choice scale. I'm gonna tell you, because I invested more than 7 months into developing this scale, just to give you an idea on how we developed it, on how a forced choice scale should be developed, because there is not a lot of information online. First, we obtain all the items that had been previously used to assess all these traits. So we generated a pool of 304 different items aimed to assess psychopathy, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and sadism. I had 15 friends to evaluate the social desirability of these items. So I asked them to rate these items on a Likert type scale from 1 to 5, from those who were very desirable, so saying I am a very humble person would be very desirable, a 5, to those who were not desirable at all. I've been involved in criminal behaviors, or I like to hurt others. I love seeing other people suffering, not desirable at all. With all that list of items, we started generating triplets of items. We started combining these items in blocks of 3, trying to maximize the unique aspects of each of the traits. Why I say this, maximize the unique aspects of each of the traits? Because when we do have someone with very high scores in psychopathy, we are also going to observe high scores in Machiavellianism and also high scores in narcissism and sadism. So we really tried to define what psychopathy was, differentiating it from Machiavellianism, narcissism, or the other traits. But if we were following the literature, we should have stopped there with our triplets completed. But we felt that there was something missing, that even if we had already assessed all the items based on social desirability, still there was something that we were missing. And the fact was that when we asked people to answer this triplet of items, some of these items, even if they were rated with a 1 as very undesirable, were chosen before the rest. I'll show you later. So I asked some of the authors of the manuscript to re-evaluate these triplets of items asking them to give a very socially desirable, asking them to be in a very socially desirable position. So if they want to obtain something, how would they order these items? And if five people did this, and if three of us were agreeing on the same order, I would remove this triplet of items and rebuild the game with other items that were equally in social desirability, so that I was sure that if I was giving an answer based on social desirability, I was giving it based on my idea of social desirability that is not shared by the rest of the people, which in the end based on my personality style. So after this, we built a couple of scales, one that is a bit longer with 24 triplets, and another one which is a bit shorter with 16 triplets. So now, this is an example of a block, not a triplet, but of a block. Now try to order the following statements honestly according to the degree that they best suit you in your way of being. From top to bottom, how would you order them? So the first one would be the one that most resembles your way of being. Well, let's get the idea of the question. Now I want you to do the same, but trying to give a good image of you. You can see that now, I just wanted you to get the idea. You can see that now it is a lot harder to decide the order. That now it is not as easy as it was for you to just say, okay, now 0, 0, 0, totally disagree, disagree, disagree. Now I'm asking you, I'm forcing you to give me an order. How are you ordering these items? In terms of how you think they might benefit you. How do you think something might benefit you? Probably the way you really are. If you think that usually we tend to give, or we tend to think that we are good people or that we are more or less good, so probably your answers this time have not changed that much from the honest condition to the failing one. As part of the data analysis, I just wanted you to speak, because basically with this, it seems that I am giving you the solution to all the problems in the Likert type scales. But this first choice does not come without limitations. And the most important limitations is the ipsativity limitation. And I guess that you might not be familiarized with this word, but basically is that imagine that I ask you to rate, to choose between, in this item, in this dyadic item, between I feel sad and I feel nervous. So once you tell me that you feel sad, you cannot tell me that you feel nervous, even if you are nervous. So I am losing information there. This allows me to say, so you are more sad than nervous, but this is not allowing me to compare you with the rest of the people. And usually when speaking about personality or any kind of psychological assessments, we are interested in comparing people to people. So this is a really big issue that we have to deal with. How to solve it? Basically, we have to move from the classical theory of tests to the item response theory. And we don't need to use a very large block, or very many block of items. So I don't really want to go deeper into this, because it is a lot about statistics and it is kind of complex even for me that I've been working in this. But basically there is a model which is called the Thurston's item response theory that allow us to generate individual scores on each of the participants for each of the traits, allowing us to compare them with the population that we are interested. For this, we had to use M+ as the statistical software because the syntax is described in this program. So I am not going to go technical, just to show you that the model estimated properly, all of the models estimated properly. We have to be aware that the adjustment values are developed for continuous data, and here we are using categorical data. Either you prefer this option or this other option, so these tend to give us less information, and the models tend to estimate worse. In this case, we are able to generate even an appropriate estimation of the models. If we speak about the reliability, we are not able in this kind of tests to calculate internal consistency reliability because of the forced choice format, but we are able to calculate test retest, and in this case, with a smaller sample of my last year students of 77 participants, I did obtain a very good test retest index within, I think, if I remember well, a 3 months period. So still consistency values of around 0.80 and 0.90. So very good consistency values for a personality scale. And about the validity, as I said before, usually men, well, usually not always, men tend to obtain higher scores in these traits than women. We found this in our scale, and more or less still working on this path, if I am honest with you. More or less, we did find some construct validity, still working a bit, as I said, in the estimating for the discriminant validity, because we know that we are measuring antisocial traits, but I cannot assure you at some point if I am measuring psychopathy and sadism. I'm being honest with you. I am still playing with M+, trying to find the best way of calculating the scores, but this is showing us some promising results, and I wanted to focus on the social desirability correlations found. If we use a Likert type scale, if we use the Short-Dark Triad and the assessment of sadistic personality, we were finding very strong connections between the dark traits and social desirability. If I accept that I am a mean person, I am also going to accept that I have behaved socially undesirable at some point. So these tend to be very high correlational coefficients, but when using these scales, these correlational coefficients decrease almost to zero. So this is showing us some promising, at least, results. Not definite results, but promising results in terms of reducing social desirability in the answers given in this specific scale. So as I said, this helps us a lot in, I am not going to say yet measuring, but in developing new measures for these specific not socially desirable traits. And it is also true that it comes with some limitations. As I said, we measure social desirability. Now I do regret a lot with a scale only composed by 7 items. I would have preferred to use a more valid and stronger one because it was not working properly, even it was showing us the results that we were looking for. And as I said, since the constructs are so closely related, since sadism is so similar to psychopathy, maybe the forced choice is not the best way of discriminating them, but just to measure that personality as a whole construct in combination with other personality constructs. And the fact and the thing in which we are working now is in trying to test this tool in high-stake situations. So now we just have use the tool in research settings, but now we would like to have people trying to deceive us, trying to win something if they are able to give a different personality profile so that we are able to test if this is really mitigating the effects of what is considered socially desirable answering. So here I have all the references, and with this I have finished. I hope I have not bored you a lot. I know that I have used a lot of time, but if you have any questions, I am here for answering them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Gela, for the amazing and insightful presentation. Your expertise and experiences in forensic technology and provided us with a deeper understanding of the field and its use.
Okay, now we will move on to the question and answer session. So this is your chance to ask any questions you might have about forensic psychology, the career paths available, or any specific points from today's presentation. We encourage everyone to participate and make the most of this opportunity. Now, to facilitate this session, for on-site attendees, please raise your hand if you have a question, and I will bring the microphone to you. Now, for our virtual attendees, please type your question in the chat box, and we will read them out, or by simply using the raise hand feature, and we will call on your name. But before that, when asking the questions, please state your name and your current college major.
Okay, that's a perfect question because, in fact, it is not very. It has been a long process, and it is not very easy to. How to say? Here, what I have presented, it is a kind of a general questionnaire aimed to measure these traits. But the reality is that if now I would have to develop a new questionnaire, I would first ask for the objective. And this is the first thing, because we do need to assess social desirability attending to the objective. So imagine that you are interested into developing a scale for a job position. Which are the important variables inside that job position? So now I am going to ask my participants to rate that items that I have developed in the same way I would develop items for a legal type scale for that specific job position, because working as a sales manager is going to require different variables as working as an assistant. So the social desirable answers are going to be different. So I would start from that point. Here it is kind of generally social desirability, but social desirability has to be rated attending to the specific objective. I don't know if I have answered, but this is something that should be that anyone who wants to develop a first choice scale has to be aware beforehand. Attend to the objective first.
Okay, thank you, Sir Galan, for the answer. I hope that answers Ka's question. Now, does anyone want to ask question? Oh, maybe we can turn back to the Zoom or virtual attendees. So the first question is from Paramita Dewi. She's currently majoring in psychology. She has a question. Have you ever heard of the concept that individuals with a dark triad personality tend to achieve higher levels of success? What specific behaviors and traits might contribute to their success?
Yes, of course. When we are speaking about these dark triad and dark tetra traits, we have to be aware that we are just speaking about personality traits, tendencies in behavior. So if we do have someone who is very strategic, who tends to plan everything, it is obvious that this person, well, it is obvious, nothing is obvious in psychology, but there is a tendency in this person, or this person is more prone to be successful in his or her objectives because they tend to plan ahead, they tend to be strategic. If someone disregards from other people's feelings, this person is not going to feel bad if they have to step over something. If someone thinks that they are entitled to, or that they deserve being treated better, they are going to ask for it. And sometimes this asking for it is also giving you what you look for. So that is why this person and this person, these types of personality do not really have to come with this antagonistic side. So if I am very strategic, I do not need to manipulate others to make other people suffer because of my strategies. If I do not really care about other people's feelings, I tell this to my students. I would love to be more psychopathic because I wouldn't feel bad when I have to fail them. So this would also help me a lot in my current job position without hurting other people on purpose. So there are some characteristics inside these traits that are very helpful.
Okay, thank you, Sir Galan, for the answer. I hope that answers your questions, yeah, Paramita. Thank you for the question as well. Now, maybe. Okay.
Hello, my name is Danika. I'm a lecturer from psychology. There's a question about, as a clinical psychologist in the forensic setting, we also have clients who are mandated the counseling resume by the court or by the police. How do you, in Indonesia, we are mandated and we must give them to the court and the police, or not, we are going to be reported by the police. So how in Spain, how as a clinical psychologist must face the court, but we do not take the client as a forensic settings, as a clinical settings, but we must give maybe a report or a testimony in the court. How can we do that in Indonesia? It's very complicated, and sometimes clinical psychologists rejected the request. But how about the in Spain?
In Spain, we are very clear about this issue. We treat clinical psychologists whenever they ask for a report or for testimony in court as witnesses, as mere witnesses, as someone who knows about the person with some expertise, but as witnesses, so that their testimony or that their report is not vinculant to the decision, because it might be affected by some biases that we are not able to control. So we treat clinical psychologists as expert witnesses. So we can ask for a report, but we will always have to use this report as another source of information, not as the only one.
Okay, does that answer your questions? Okay, thank you for the questions. Now,
We can move to the virtual analyst question. We have one more last question, right?
okay, it's from Kevin. He's currently majoring in psychology. So he has a question. I'd like to ask, was Dahmer sadistic because he was sad to have killed people to make them into corpse and he got satisfaction from the corpse, not from hurting the person? We know that he is a necrophilic, but don't know whether he is sadistic or not, because I think there is debate about that.
A very interesting question about criminal profiling. Yeah. Again, it is very hard from us to stay away from these psychopathological labels. When we are speaking about Dahmer, we would be speaking about someone with some sort of high scores, and I love to speak about the scores and not about labels. High scores in sexual sadism, so obtaining pleasure from other suffering, specifically addressing to this, specifically speaking about the sexual area. So yes, we would be speaking, or if we were able to conduct an assessment on him, definitely we will observe some kind of high scores in sadism. But remember that we are just speaking about deviations of the norm inside that specific set of characteristics. But that's all. It is very hard, if not almost impossible, for us as people and psychologists to set a cutoff point that now you are a sadistic person, or now you are not a sadistic person. No, you have a tendency towards sadistic behaviors, or you have a tendency towards non-sadistic behaviors. But that's it.
Okay, thank you, Sir Galan, for the answer. I hope that answers Kevin's question. Now we will move back to the Zoom attendees. Yeah, okay, maybe we can see who's the one who raising hand. Okay,
Hello, is it me?
okay, we can hear you. Okay,
Okay.
go ahead and ask the questions.
so-
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Hello, my name is Nori. I'm from Center for Women and Women and Child Protection of Jakarta, and I work mostly with the victim of gender violence. And I would like to ask you about most of my clients are gender-based violence. So we sometimes have to like assess about the impact of gender violence, and sometimes when we try to assess the characteristic of the client, they show some, like malingering symptoms. And as someone who worked with the victims, it's very difficult for me to like write the reports about how to integrate the malingering or histrionic aspect of the client and how we describe the impact of gender-based violence, since like it's it's very difficult for me because I think I have to advocate the rights of the victims at one point, but at another point we have to tell the court that she shows some symptoms like malingering or histrionic personality, and well, it's very confusing for me at least. So I would like to know about your opinion about this. Thank you very much.
This goes perfectly in line with the question I answered before of having a clinical psychologist filing a report on a person they are treating, because we might fall into some biases, not aiming to harm the person or not even looking for that hypothesis or trying to test that hypothesis. That is why I do think that it is vital to distinguish the forensic figure from the clinical figure, or from the one who is going to provide the treatment, who is going to avoid re-victimization, who is going to take care of the person. Meanwhile, another person is going to be the one conducting the initial assessment. And once we have collected all the information, another person can take care of the victim, which in the end, we are just trying to help her. That is the objective of all of us. But we should try to avoid falling into that biases. And maybe if you do not have the possibility of having two separate roles because you do not have the resources of having two people dealing with these roles, maybe it is about creating assessment protocols in which you are always testing that hypothesis. And that's it, without trying to blame, to re-victimize the person, but just as part of your standard. assessment protocol. Have I provided you an answer to your question?
Yes, but really, do we have to like write the personality, even though it's contain like malingering or histrionic, and it will probably impact the you know it probably impact the effect of the gender-based violence. Do we still have to like write it down?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sorry. So
Could you
so if we knew that, yes. Sorry for the loud voice.
Okay, while waiting for. Okay.
Sorry. So even though we found that the victims actually has like malingering or like histrionic personality, do we have to still write it down in the report because it's probably affect how she perceive the events, the violence, and also it's also impact how she reported herself in the data collection.
Okay, now I think I understand you better. So you have found that the victim is already trying to simulate some symptoms or has some personality tendencies towards being victimized, maybe, or something like that. This is something that I tend to discuss a lot with my students on how to write the reports. And we have to be very careful on our writing because sometimes it is not about throwing labels as if we were, I don't know, medical doctors, so to say. We have to find a way of transmitting our ideas that resembles or that it is more like it appears in reality. So maybe we do not have to write the person is simulating because we do not really know that. We just know that maybe the symptoms are not completely valid and we have to contrast this with some other sources of information. It is about how we transmit it. If instead of saying, I think that you mentioned the example of someone who is very histrionic, right? It is not about saying this person suffers from an histrionical personality disorder, but the symptoms, the behavioral characteristics, the situations in which this histrionic, remember that histrionic is a label that helps us in identifying a set of characteristics. So sometimes it is much better to describe specifically that characteristics because the person that we have in front in a code doesn't know anything about psychology. If we write histrionic, that person is going to Google it and is going to obtain the information that Google gives him or her. So if we just describe the characteristics that might be affecting the behavior of that person, specifically with examples, we are going to give a more objective image of the reality without re-victimizing and without labeling and without committing any kind of other prejudice in the victim itself. And still, I am considering that person a victim. So it is about approaching that victim as a person without trying to avoid labels in the end.
Okay, does
Thank you very much
answer
for the
your
question.
Okay, since we are running out of time, maybe this is the last question for Sir Morillo. Let's take a look on the Zoom chat. Okay. Oh, there it is from Giselda. Hello, hope you're having a good day. My name is Giselle, and I'm also majoring in psychology, and I'm interested to continue my studies in either clinical or forensic field. So this topic was really interesting for me. My question is, how is your experience being in the forensic psychology field? Because in that field, we would be dealing with a really dark part of people or humanity, especially handling court cases, and it must also not be easy to deal with those things for ourselves too. Thank you, sir.
That's a very interesting and personal question, but there is one direct answer, and it is about differentiating between the personal and the professional. and that's it. So this is something I learned a lot of years ago when I started working inside the prison, because at the beginning I was kind of overwhelmed by all the stories that I was receiving, by the people I was interviewing. But later I decided, okay, it is not that I decided, I just learned that this was part of my profession and I had to be used to deal with these stories, to understand them and to treat them as normal people, as if I was treating my friends. And this is the best advice I can give you. Even when treating victims, I think that it is much more complicated, because with perpetrators it's another role, or the role that you have to take is maybe more a professional one, or the role that I tend to take. But when speaking with victims and being also a clinical psychologist, it is kind of being in between fields in which you have to show some empathy, but still you are playing the role of the forensic psychologist. So you have to be aware of testing all the hypotheses. And one of the hypotheses is that the person you have in front is not a victim. So it is about dealing with that. I tend to tell to my students whenever I go inside the court, or whenever I go inside or to have an interview, I suit up as the psychologist. I am not Manuel anymore. I am the psychologist who is going to interview that person. And later, this is just kind of a story to tell or something like that. But it is not something that I struggle dealing with. Thank you very much for your question.
You all for engaging questions and considering critical answers. And it's clear from the discussion that the forensic psychology is a field for which we potential and significant improvements. And as a person and all our seminar, I would like to take a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Morillo for taking the time to share his experience in forensic psychology. Let's give him applause.
Okay, I would also like to thank you, all of you, our participants, either in a Zoom meeting or on site, for your active engagement and enthusiasm throughout the seminar. Your presence and participation have made this event truly special. Okay, but one last thing before we move to the next session, we would like to ask and hear a closing remark from our incredible speaker, Sir Gallen. Sir Gallen, would you please give a warm closing remark and meaningful message to the participants? Oh, okay. So, one last thing, we would like to hear a closing remark from Sir Gallen to the participants.
So again, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you very much. Please give an applause to our MCs because they've been amazing. They've done a very beautiful job. I hope if you knew about forensic psychology that at least I have refreshed that knowledge, and if you don't, that you have learned a bit from it, and also these areas of research in forensic psychology. And I am delighted of being here, and thank you very much for your welcome here. Thank you very much.
Let's give a round of applause from Sir Gallen. Now, before we end today's event, it is a great opportunity to commemorate this memorable event with Sir Gallen. Therefore, let's take a documentation session. To all participants, let's gather in the middle, yeah, for the on-site attendees. And for the online attendees, please simply turn on your camera because we will have a documentation session together. Okay. Maybe for us on-site attendees, from my left side, please gather in the middle, and from my right side, please gather in the middle as well. And from the back, please come up to the front. For the online attendees, please turn on your camera, and we will be having the documentation session right away.
gonna count 1, 2, 3. Ready, guys? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
Okay, maybe another one. We can take a video or. Oh, already. Yes, let's take a video. Okay. Okay, let's get ready, guys.
1, 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay, thank you everyone for the documentation session.
As a reminder, we always should be amazing event. Don't forget to spend the existing time so that your attendance will be very. Just maybe we will wait.
Yes, maybe around 1 until 2 minutes, yeah, for them to to fill out the exit ticket. Don't forget to fill in, yeah, guys, because this is crucial for the confirmation about your attendance.
It was a really interesting topic, Jen.
Yes, it is very insightful indeed. I learned about forensic psychology even deeper, yeah, and the difference between clinical psychology. It gives out a clear differences and understanding about it. Okay, maybe they have already done fill in the exit ticket. Oh yeah, it seems like most of them still, yeah, fill in the exit ticket.
Okay, thank you once again, guys, for joining us today. We hope you found this webinar informative and inspiring. Have a great day, and we look forward to our continuing with our future webinar.
Stay safe and take care. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to Sir Morillo.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for attending, either in the on-site or in the online. Don't
Thank you.
forget to fill in the exit ticket, yeah.